Hello, everyone. We might just give it a couple of minutes to make sure everyone's able to get in. Uh, okay, so we might get started today, guys. Hello and welcome to today's Lead the Way webinar, Unlocking Better Leadership Through Better Sleep. My name is Jason Goodall. I am the Corporate Solutions Manager for New South Wales and ACT here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, Australia and New Zealand. I'd like to begin today's event by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all meeting from today, and paying my respects to elders past and present. It's wonderful to have you here as we continue our Lead the Way series with our July session. For those of you joining for the first time, here at the Institute of Managers and Leaders, we have the privilege of working with hundreds of fantastic corporate clients and members every day, and truly living our vision of creating better managers and better leaders for a better society. Alongside webinars like today, IML does offer a range of leadership development courses, advanced resources, all designed to support, connect, and upskill leaders at every stage of their journey. If your business is looking for support with your development needs, one of the best ways to get started is through IML Corporate Membership, which gives you and your team access to all of these resources. I'll share a little more about all of that with you later in today's session. And that brings us to why we are here. Through our Lead the Way webinar series, we aim to provide practical tools, fresh insights, and real-world strategies to help you thrive as a leader in today's fast-paced and constantly evolving environment. Each session brings knowledge and experience of outstanding subject matter experts who generously give their time to share, challenge, and inspire. Today, we'll be exploring the critical connection between sleep and effective leadership. We are thrilled to be joined by Henrique Salles, sleep psychologist at Each, a valued IML corporate member, who is going to be sharing his insights and strategies with us this afternoon. Henrique will be exploring how sleep impacts on our health, regulation, and performance, and will share practical strategies to help us improve our sleep so we can lead with greater clarity, composure, and confidence. To give you a bit of background on Henrique, he's a clinical psychologist with strong experience in sleep and insomnia treatments. He was involved with the development of the Better Sleep program, which was evaluated by Deakin University and found to be an effective program in supporting people's sleep and insomnia. Henrique delivers workshops as part of this program, teaching participants about the science of sleep and evidence-based strategies for improving sleep. Before I pass over to Henrique, if you do have any questions throughout today's session, please send them through via the chat or the QA function at the bottom of your screen, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And we'll do our best to get to as many of those questions at the end of the presentation. Henrique, a really warm welcome to you. Please take it away.
Thank you, Jason. And hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Henrique. I will skip my bio because Jason has very nicely said it. And so thanks for joining us for the Better Sleep Program workshop. So essentially, I work at Reconnection, a service of Each, and Reconnection over about 4 decades now has supported people with a lot of sleep issues and insomnia. And so through that, we've developed this program. which we now deliver to the community. And so today will be about an hour long, and I'm going to try and make sure I get through everything in time so we can get through some questions as well. There's three main components of today. So the first third is the science of sleep, and so helping understand how sleep happens and sort of the underlying mechanisms of it. Sometimes we want to rush to the strategies and what to do, but sometimes we've all heard a lot of strategies for sleep, but sometimes actually understanding the science behind it, even if sometimes it feels a bit boring, is actually quite important to give that rationale and the reasonings for why different strategies might work better than others, and so on. The second third is helping understand what could be causing the sleep problem. Sometimes things are quite clear and sometimes they're not, and so we'll go through that, and ideally for yourself, you can start to think about what it might be for you, so that then when we get to the strategies, you can try to choose the things that are, I guess, most effective to your particular situation, as much as is possible in a group format. We'll try to sort of tailor it to what is relevant to you. And then what people often are sort of waiting for, which is the strategies to improve sleep. So that will be the third, I guess, of the presentation. And we'll make a bit of a plan for what to do after today. So, understanding sleep. We're going to start with, I'm not sure if everyone has used Mentimeter. If you have a phone and you're happy to either scan this or type menti.com and put in that code, this will be a few times throughout the presentation will allow us to do like an anonymous survey where we can look at each other's experiences. So I might just give you guys a moment to scan that if you're happy to. I'm seeing that a lot of people are coming up and people are giving me a thumbs up, I believe, unless that's just Menti trying to make me feel better. Okay. And if you do, if you can't sort of get back in later, you just type menti.com and the actual slides will have this code, and so you can just input it afterwards as well. Thank you. Someone said the thumbs up for me, so that's lovely. Thank you. Okay. So first Mentimeter is rating how you perceive your sleep quality. And so out of 10, 10 being perfect, nothing to improve, 0 being couldn't be worse, so really impacting, and maybe somewhere in between, might be not the best, but really probably seeing a bit of an impact on maybe your daily functioning or feeling quite tired or not being very happy with how your sleep is. And it sounds like we're just above sort of that middle ground, so could be better for probably most people, if not almost everybody, and then for maybe like a third of the people, it seems to be quite bad, which hopefully this workshop will be able to help as well. Okay. So we're going to start with, why is good quality sleep so important? Sleep, because we kind of just go unconscious and then wake up, it seems like a waste of time, or we don't think much about it. Unless we really are having a lot of trouble sleeping, then it's hard not to think about it. But sleep largely it gets forgotten, but increasingly, and especially now that we've got the mechanisms to actually analyze the brain and actually see what's happening during our sleep, we know that actually sleep is incredibly important for us. I like the analogy of, it's almost like it's not shutting down the computer at night and then turning it on the next day. It's more like those like software updates that we all tend to postpone, but where you might restart when the computer's doing updates and making changes that you can't see. And then when it restarts, you might not even notice what's happened, but things have happened in the background. And that's essentially what sleep is. One of the key things that sleep is very important for is our immune defense. And so a lot of our immune systems get regulated while we're asleep. You might have noticed this yourself, that often if we're not sleeping well for a while, we're more likely to get sick, and the research does back that up. They've had interesting studies where they track people's sleep in terms of over a week, how long they sleep. And there was one interesting study where they brought everyone in to the clinic they put in like a nasal drops that had a common cold virus, and then they monitored them over many days after. And people who slept the previous week on average 6 hours or less, as compared to people that slept 7 hours or more, people that had 6 hours or less were 4 times more likely to get sick from that virus that was put into their nose, as compared to 7 hours or more. And that's just one example where, as leaders, as managers, obviously this is important for yourself in terms of the impact that getting sick has on our ability to engage in our work. And then also, if you're leading a team, it's the importance of other people also, in terms of the impacts on sick leave and people having to take time off and people not being able to work fully because of sickness. So that's one key reason that I feel passionate about in terms of our immune system. Emotional behavioral regulation is also huge. And again, maybe you've noticed this, that when we're not sleeping well, we tend to be more irritable. We tend to more easily get upset or annoyed. It's harder to think rationally in the moment. They've done studies where people are quite sleep deprived. They, on average, if they see like a neutral facial expression or a neutral social cue, they're more likely to interpret that in a more hostile way. And so it might trigger that fight or flight response, even if the other person didn't have that intent. And so if we're in a room and we're trying to read the room, or we're, negotiating with someone, or even just working with our colleagues, if we're not sleeping very well, we're more likely to have our amygdalas, which is the part of the brain that have that fight or flight response, much more likely to have that activated, and much harder to make calm, rational decisions and to engage interpersonally with our team members or our employees in a healthy interpersonal way. Physical recovery, energy replenishment. So this is particularly important for, I guess, athletes, but even just for the general population. It's during sleep that our tissue repairs, our muscle repairs, our energy repairs, which I'll talk about in a slide soon. And so, and this is maybe the most obvious one that people notice, that when we're not sleeping well, we just feel exhausted. And so this is very important, just replenish our energy, reduce risks of burnout, and so on. Memory and learning. So a lot of we take in so much information during the day that we don't even fully realize, and our brain, while we're asleep, processes a lot of that, and that's where a lot of the memory becomes encoded in the long-term memory. If we're not sleeping well, we're much less likely to remember things in the future that we might have been exposed to today. As well as if we're not sleeping well, the next day, we're less likely to learn because of inattentiveness and difficulties taking information in. Risk and error mitigation. This is, some industries is extremely important. Others maybe less so, but still relevant. And so, poor sleep, of course, is linked to a lot of risks around transportation, driving. Healthcare is often not maybe discussed as much as I think it should be, but there can be a lot of errors due to sleep deprivation. But it can really expand to anything else that might involve human error, financial sectors, or any other thing. And so the amount of error that can be caused, and again, this is maybe something that we all might intuitively know, that if we're quite sleep deprived, we're not processing things well, we might skip through things without realizing. And so this is a key factor as well. And our brain health and executive functioning. Executive functioning is the parts of the brain that essentially, it's like the management part of the brain. It does a lot of the problem solving, prioritizing, planning ahead, organizing, and this is something that poor sleep over time really does impact. Our brains essentially, just through being alive and functioning, our brains use up sort of fuel, and it creates like waste in the brain. And it's during sleep that the brain flushes a lot of that, a lot of those like proteins and waste out of the brain. And so just for sort of long-term brain health, sleep is very important, but also even just in the short term, our ability to think rationally, our ability to pay attention and sustain attention during a meeting, our ability to remember. So our working memory, like our short-term memory, is one of the things that are most impacted by poor sleep. And so if a colleague or someone asks us to do a task, we're more likely to forget that, forget people's names, forget content that we're going to present on. And so if we're not sleeping well, a lot of these sort of higher order cognitive abilities are impacted. So with that in mind, for yourself, if you want to have a bit of a think of what are the signs that you aren't getting good quality sleep, and so there'll probably be a lot of similarities, but people do tend to notice differences in how they respond. I don't know if you can see that. I hope that you can. Yes, great. Brain fog, yes. Exhaustion, always tired. Kids, I want lollies. Yep. Irritation, headaches, forgetful, wanting to nap in the middle of the day, waking still tired, difficulty thinking. Oh God, there's a lot. Sorry. Bad Garmin readings, headaches, pains, forgetfulness. Yes, 2 to 3 p.m. crash. I'll talk about that in a second. Poor decision making. That's obviously a big one for this audience in terms of maybe importance. So I won't be able to go through them all, but yeah, a lot of irritability and tiredness. Yeah, lack of concentration, brain fog. Yeah, for me, it's probably the brain fog. I do find that if I don't sleep well, I'm walking around and I'm a little bit, I'm not not fully there. Thank you, everyone. So hopefully these things, and like this, what we often also see is people kind of just get used to living with these symptoms or whatever we want to call it. It becomes our norm and just how we live our days. And people don't often realize that actually this doesn't have to always be that way. Of course, there can be other factors for why we might be experiencing all this, but often sleep is one factor, and it's something that hopefully if we can work on our sleep, a lot of these other symptoms or difficulties will also improve. And people, sometimes report, it's been like years or decades that they've just sort of got used to this feeling, but it doesn't always have to be that way. So how does sleep work? You might know, and I'm not going to spend too long on this, but there's different types of sleep. There's like the REM sleep, which is when our eyes do the rapid eye movement. And that's often where we sleep, where we dream. And there is like a non-REM sleep, which starts with like a light sleep and then goes into deeper sleep. And what people sometimes don't know is that we go through this cycle many times throughout the night. So we don't go to sleep and then it gets really deep and then eventually it gets light and then we wake up. Rather, it goes deep REM light, many times throughout the night. There is more, in the first sort of half of the night, there's a lot more deep sleep and not much REM. And then as the night progresses, it switches and there's a lot more REM sleep than deep. That's partly why also we tend to dream a lot more like closer to like the time that we wake up. There's a lot more REM in the second half of the night. I have mentioned these already. And yeah, it is normal to wake up between each sleep cycle. So sometimes people wake up when they reach the end and they're like in that light sleep. That's completely fine. Usually you might not even realize it, or you might realize it and you toss a little bit, toss and turn, and then you sleep again. Sometimes when people are having insomnia, the waking up can cause a certain level of a bit of stress about, I've woken up, and that unfortunately can then contribute to being awake for longer. And so it can be quite normal, and hopefully it doesn't stress you out if you do have a little bits of awakening. And maybe I'll just also say, like, the deep sleep is largely when it's more like the body repairs. It's more focused on the body, whereas REM, it's got a bit more of I guess, it helps more like the mind and emotions. So more like emotional regulation and emotional memories that get processed during REM, whereas here it's more like physical. But I wouldn't worry too much about this. The key thing just to know is that also because REM happens largely at the end of the night, if you keep consistently sleeping less than your body wants, you're much more likely to be cutting off like the REM sleep, which is more like, helps regulate emotion and memories and so on. This one here is a little bit, hopefully you find it interesting, but we think it's very important to know. And so with most things in life, we can choose to do it. I can choose to like stand up, I can choose to move my hands around, I can choose to go for a run or not. With sleep, we can't. So unfortunately, we can't choose to fall asleep. It's just something that the body does. And when we try to do it and we're overly conscious of doing it, sometimes the body is a bit, it just doesn't do it. What does put us into sleep is sort of these internal systems and processes within the body. One is circadian rhythm. This you might have heard of. It's a 24-hour cycle. It's largely moderated by how much light hits your eyes. There's like receptors in the eye, and when light hits the eye, it sends a signal to the brain that suppresses like melatonin, for example, and it keeps you more alert. And then when it gets dark and when it gets cooler and your body cools down because it's nighttime, that's like a sign that the body then starts going into like a sleep stage. And sleep pressure is kind of like hunger. So the longer that you go without sleeping, the hungrier you get for sleep. And then when you sleep, it goes down. Kind of like when you eat a meal, you're then less hungry. Similar to like a meal, if you snack before dinner, it goes down and then goes back up, and you might be less hungry at dinner time. With napping, if you nap at 6 and then you wake up, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but it will keep going up, and it'll still go up, but it might be less high when you get to nighttime. And sleep pressure, essentially, like if we do more things during the day, if we exercise, that tends to go up. Whereas if we're not doing very much, that tends to be lower. So we will come back to this concept, but a lot of the strategies that we talk about are about these two processes. Conscious of time, I might sort of skip this. This is looking at the idea that we're all, there's healthy sleep, and then we're all going to have some occasional sleep disturbances, occasional nights when we don't sleep too well, but then that tends to then get back to normal. Sometimes a lot of people will have insomnia, which might be several nights a week, having a lot of difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep. And then chronic insomnia is when it becomes months and months, years, or in many cases, decades of insomnia and sleeping difficulties. And so if we can try and catch it earlier, great. But even if we're in this upper range, there are very effective ways to be able to help with your sleep. All right, what causes sleep problems? So there's the biopsychosocial model, which is the idea that most things are influenced by biological factors, social factors, and psychological factors. I'm not going to go through all of these, but for biological, for sleep, like there's many. There's age. Menopause is a huge one, and so we often hear that people report after menopause they just can't sleep as well anymore. Light exposure is what I was talking about. So these are all biological factors that influence our sleep. Social can be our family, it can be our friends, it can be our work hours. It might be more sort of things that impact maybe like you have a sleep pattern that ideally you're sleeping later and waking up later, but because of your work hours, you have to wake up early. So that could be a social factor, or you have a partner who snores, or you have a partner who sleeps at a much different time than you. These are all social factors that can influence. And then psychological, which can include habits as well, which we'll talk about, and anxiety about sleep, which is very common. So I'll go to the next one because we touch on this in more depth. But if you can have a think about what factors you feel contribute to your own sleeping problem, and we will have a look. For me, it's definitely like procrastinating sleep. And so I want to go to sleep. I even often noted that I'm tired, but sometimes the time just sort of flies by, and then you think, oh, let me reply to this person, let me look at this website, and then suddenly 2 hours have gone by. Okay, a few physical health, snoring partner, exercising too late. Yes, so exercising too late because it also raises like our internal temperature. That's one factor for why it can impact. Menopause, as mentioned, alcohol is a very common thing that people use to sleep, but it's actually quite unhelpful. It sedates you, so it can help people fall asleep, but the actual quality of the sleep tends to be a lot worse. This one mentee option always blows my mind because I'm trying to read and then it jumps. So I can't read, but there's many reasons. And so I hope that you can keep that in mind, because at the end as well, we want to try and focus on the one thing, maybe two things, maybe one thing that we can try to support with. And we also want to end up choosing something that we have a bit more control over. So some things we might not have much control over, whereas others we do. But there's a whole range of factors: screens, stress, light pollution. Thank you all. Sorry, it's a large crowd, so it's a bit harder to follow, but thank you. And overthinking was a big one. This is my favorite graph of all time. Now this is the Institute of Managers and Leaders. So I'm sure you've all seen many graphs before, but nothing like this. This is just amazing. So not so much visually, but more the idea behind it. So this is what keeps sleep problems going, and I love it because I think it's very helpful for people that are having insomnia, and to help avoid insomnia becoming an issue. So we've got time. It depends on the context, like how long that is. And here we've got the severity of the sleeping difficulty. So if we're talking about difficulties falling asleep, I don't know, I'm making this up, but this might be like 10 minutes is all right, maybe 20 minutes is okay, but maybe when it's like 40 minutes, it might be a threshold for insomnia. So up is like the difficulty, here is time. We all have predisposing factors. And so these are factors that make us more vulnerable to having insomnia. It could be genetics, like a family history of sleeping issues. These don't tend to themselves cause insomnia, and different people will have different amounts of this. So some people might be closer to that threshold than others. Then we have a precipitating factor. So this is what tends to cause the insomnia to start. And so that could be a stressful week at work. It might be a lot of interpersonal issues with somebody, or with friends, or with colleagues, or it might be there's a big report that's due, making big life decisions. Jet lag is a very big one. Illness, the list goes on, as was talked about before. But many things can cause insomnia, and it might be that it impacts your sleep for a night, maybe a couple of nights, maybe a week. But usually these factors eventually go away. Obviously, some, like children, will be much longer in terms of the time frame, but the precipitating factor comes and it goes. Unfortunately, and this is why I like this graph, is that just naturally for anybody, if we're having poor sleep and we're having insomnia, like we just change how we're engaging in the day, we change our habits, we can start getting preoccupied and a bit nervous about sleep. So if we're having some poor nights of sleep and then I've got a big meeting tomorrow, I'm going to go to bed kind of doubting and being a little bit concerned about if I'm going to sleep or not. If I sleep that badly, am I going to have to call in sick? If I can't drive, can I drive? Am I going to be a risk to other people if I'm driving? Like suddenly the mind starts getting a lot very concerned about sleep naturally, due to the impacts that poor sleep has on us. Our habits change. We might have a lot more coffee to make up for it. We might exercise less because we're just tired. Naturally, we spend a lot of time in bed awake because we're not sleeping well. And so during that day or that week, we're spending a lot of time tossing and turning and thinking and planning in bed. And unfortunately, all of these things are what we call like perpetuating factors. And so these things sort of start up while we're having insomnia. And fortunately, or often the original factor has actually gone but suddenly people are stuck in this loop where they just can't sleep, or they go to bed and they're very anxious, or they keep waking up. A lot of people report that they're very sleepy and then they go to bed and suddenly they're awake. And these perpetuating factors is what tends to cause that chronic insomnia. And it's so natural to do these things. It's why I like it. I like talking about it, because I think it's a very natural and common thing that people experience, but unfortunately it keeps it going. And so if we can figure out what are these perpetuating factors that are maintaining insomnia for myself, then we can try to target strategies for that. And often we have less control over these. We have very little, if any, control over these, but these are more within our sphere of control. And so if we're wanting to improve our sleep, this is usually the best thing to be focusing on. And so that's largely what the strategies that I'll talk about are going to try and address. And just lastly, the good thing about knowing this is that even if you're not having insomnia, if you know about these habits that we'll talk about, as soon as this happens, as soon as you get the initial insomnia, if you know about these things, you can actively try to very quickly not engage in them, and you're much more likely for the insomnia to just go back down again. And so I think awareness about these factors can help it just as a preventative thing as well. Okay, so what to do now if you're having very bad sleep? Sleep hygiene, we all hear about it. Sleep hygiene can be helpful. Having a shower before bed and putting our phones away, and these are things that I'll talk about. But if you do have insomnia, you've got chronic insomnia, sometimes it's just not enough, and people try these things and they feel sort of let down, and they feel a bit hopeless because it's not improving. Sleep hygiene in itself is not super helpful for insomnia. The gold standard, it's called CBTI, cognitive behavior therapy for insomnia. So this is a structured psychological behavioral, more behavioral therapy that usually it's about 6 to 8 sessions, and it's very effective, and it's meant to be the first line treatment for insomnia. It includes these factors here, which are largely covered in our presentation broadly, except for bed restriction. That's like a complex thing that requires sleep diaries, and usually it's done with a psychologist or a clinician. But these 4 here, I will talk about a bit more broadly around strategies for them. But if you ever do need, and you feel like your sleep is quite bad and you're wanting more one-on-one support, if you can seek out CBTI, usually it's done by a psychologist, but if you can seek out CBTI, this can be most helpful. And this was mentioned at the start, but we have, Deacon did do a research study on this workshop and did find that people's insomnia severity did improve. And so hopefully, we can't promise that obviously, that everyone will improve, but if you can take something from this workshop and try to really apply it, hopefully you'll be able to see some improvements in your sleep as well. Look at the time. Okay. So what can I do during the day? And there's going to be some things that will be a bit repetitive, but some things just require repetition. So, and one of them is consistency. Our bodies, our brains really like consistency. Again, the circadian rhythm has a roughly 24-hour cycle. A lot of the cells in the body respond to that. And a lot of us just don't have that. A lot of us don't have much consistency in our days. And for sleep, that really helps. Again, the sleep is not something we can choose to just go to bed and do. For some people, it's easier than others, but largely it's an internal biological process. And if we can be consistent, for example, waking up at the same time every morning, that is huge in terms of helping our sleep. If we're waking up at the same time, we're getting light entering our eyes. These are all cues that the body uses to then make us more alert, and X number of hours later, make us more sleepy again. This is something that when people have insomnia can go a bit out the window because they're trying to sleep in because they're tired, or okay, tomorrow I'm working from home, so I can sleep in an extra hour. We all do this, but if you're struggling with your sleep, having a consistent time, even if you're tired, is absolutely the recommendation. Compensatory behaviors. These are things that we do to compensate for being tired. The obvious ones being coffee, but also nap. If we can replace that with something else, that can be very helpful. I mean, coffee stays in your system for way longer than people realize. Like if you drink something, depends on what you're drinking, but it's something like 6 hours is the half-life, meaning that if you drink a coffee at 3 p.m, around 9 p.m, you still have about like half of that caffeine in your body. And so, again, some people can do it and they seem to be okay, but if you're struggling with sleep, trying to maybe not have a coffee or a caffeine after midday. Some people say that they drink coffee and then they go to sleep fine, and that can happen, but it doesn't always mean that the actual sleep quality is that good. People can sometimes fall asleep, but it's a bit more broken, it's not as deep. And so just generally, there's nothing wrong with coffee. I drink it, but if we can try to drink it earlier in the day, that's better. Same with nap. So rather than having a nap, moving around, getting outside. So I mentioned the 2 to 3 p.m. slump. That often does happen around 2 to 3 p.m. I didn't actually point it out in that graph, but in the circadian rhythm, there is a bit of a dip in the 2 to 3 p.m. Slot. I used to do like a walking meeting with a colleague of mine. So we used to, around like that 2 o'clock, I always get quite tired around then. And we used to just walk around the building and discuss things that we had to discuss. And sometimes just getting outside, getting some sunlight into the eye can be very helpful and can wake us up without the need of the caffeine. Exercise is very highly associated with sleep. When we exercise, it increases that sleep pressure. And so doing it regularly doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be sort of a mild exercise, but moving and avoiding, sometimes when we're tired, that's like the last thing we might want to do. But if we can have movement in our day, that really helps with sleep. This one, I've already sort of said it, but this is really key. So trying to get sunlight, trying to get outside. Obviously, we're not looking at the sun, but just getting sunlight. When the receptors notice that there's a lot of light, it wakes us up, and vice versa. So at night, I moved the order this morning and I forgot to change the order of the animation. That's all right. So the wind down routine, actually, I'm just going to skip that. I thought to have light at the start because it's actually the early thing to happen. So ideally when the sun goes down, we want to reduce light. That's what naturally would happen if the sun went down. But these days, the sun goes down and then we turn on all the lights. So we've got the TV on, we go to bed and we're like 10 centimeters from that little phone light box. And none of these lights are as strong as the sun, but they are still tricking the brain a little bit. And again, when light hits the retina, the receptors, it stops, for example, melatonin, which is the body chemical that makes us sleepy. And so if we can reduce that, I like to just have less lights on or have like a lamp. Some people have like the fancy new lights that can automatically dim at a certain time. The less that we've got light hitting the eye, and the more that you start doing this, the more you'll start to notice that you might start to like yawn, like your body does start to get more sleepy when there's less light. And sorry, I am seeing there are some questions, but yeah, I'll try and get them all at the end. But yeah, feel free to keep posting them. Don't need to wait. Wind down routine, again, thinking about the consistency. If we're doing things consistently and we have routines, the body and the brain seem to follow that. You might have noticed that if you've had a period of your life that you woke up at the same time every day, often you just sort of wake up a few minutes before your alarm, as an example. And so the body gets used to routines and consistency. And so the inverse of the routine is also true, where if we have a bit of a routine that we do before bed. Maybe it's I'm going to put everything away, I'm going to have a tea, I'm going to read a book, I'm going to journal. Your body starts to know that sleep, it's sleep time, and it's more likely to fall asleep. Calming activities, and so just the idea that we want to do things that are a bit more calm in nature rather than thrilling. This one here is a very big one. It's not for everyone, but if you're having a lot of trouble sleeping, it's the idea that we want to have the bed and like lying down in the dark in bed to be only associated with sleep. And so one is that we don't use the bed for anything else rather than sleep or like intimacy. And so we don't want to be watching TV, reading the news, being on our phone, replying to work emails. And I know that as leaders, often there's a pressure to always be available or to always be reading things or to be up to date with what's happening. But that can also often extend into being the last thing that we do in bed and then the first thing that we look at when we wake up. And that's not helpful for our sleep. This is the really hard one. If you're in bed and you're not falling asleep, the recommendation is to get out of bed. This is the hardest thing to do because it sucks. It's often cold, it's dark, we're tired. Maybe we have a partner who's very soundly asleep. But again, we just don't want to be spending too much time in bed awake, tossing and turning, thinking, planning. And so if we're going to bed and something's really upset us and we keep reliving the same conversation from earlier in the day and we're not falling asleep, ideally we should actually get out of bed until we feel sleepy again. And so we get out, we do something else that you enjoy, that's calming. And then when you feel sleepy, you return to bed. And the worst part is that ideally you got to repeat that. And so if you then go back to bed and you're still not falling asleep, you get out of bed. I'm happy to expand on this further at the end as well if people have questions. This is very hard to do, but it's very effective. And it's not a forever thing either. Often if people do this, people start to actually sleep better. The brain gets used to when I lie down, it's time to go into that sleep mode rather than to think and to plan and to read the news and so on. I'm checking the time. Okay. How to manage an overactive mind. So this is a very common thing for insomnia. As I mentioned before, it's just one, it can cause insomnia, but also insomnia in itself can cause a lot of stress and anxiety because of the effects of it. And so this is very common for a lot of people. One is cognitive strategies. This is often what psychologists do if you ever need, but this is helping us look at our thought patterns, maybe challenge some of our worries about what might happen. If we're worried about not sleeping well and how am I going to do in that meeting tomorrow, we can maybe reframe. We can think about, okay, yes, it's not the best. And yes, when I don't sleep well, I don't function at my best, but also I have slept poorly in the past and I have gone to work and I've gotten my job done. Maybe it wasn't the best, but it was okay. Sometimes like reframing some of these worries can stop them sort of blowing up and it can help us fall asleep a little bit easier. This one is an interesting one, designated worry time. And so I think partly the reason for this is just that we don't have much time to really think these days, even though we're just always switched on. We're reading something. When we're walking from the kitchen to the bedroom, we're looking at our emails or our messages. When we're in the car, we're listening to a podcast or the radio. Like all the time, there's something going on that we're some sort of stimulus, and we're not having much time to really just think. And that's actually what the brain is for. Like the brain is made to think and to worry and to plan. But often it's only when we go to bed and we put the phone away. For some people, that's the first time in the day that they've actually been without like looking at a screen and without hearing someone or talking with someone. And so often that's when the mind starts thinking and reflecting and planning. And so having a time beforehand to do that can be very helpful. It can either be a designated time of the first half hour before dinner each night or after dinner, I'm going to sit and I'm going to plan, I'm going to reflect on things. Or it can be what I try and do personally sometimes, which is just sometimes having time away from the phone. So if I'm driving home I often like podcasts or audiobooks, but sometimes I just turn it off and I just drive in quiet peace, or going for a walk without music, that sort of thing. This one here I also find interesting. Paradoxical intent. This is based on, they've done studies where they get two groups of people. One group is trying to fall asleep and one group is trying to stay awake while in bed. And for people that have insomnia, on average, people that try to stay awake actually fall asleep faster than people that are trying to sleep. It's partly because just the pressure of falling asleep and noticing, oh, I'm drifting off, and then that wakes them up. That in itself makes it hard to sleep. And so interestingly, if you have a lot of trouble falling asleep in bed, sometimes actually just trying to stay awake. So you can lie there in the dark, but just trying to think about things or trying to open your eyes and keep them open. Or if you're listening to like a meditation or like an audiobook, rather than listening to that and hoping that you'll fall asleep, actually like trying to listen to it and actually trying to do it properly and not fall asleep. For a lot of people, they actually fall asleep faster, paradoxically, hence the name. How to help my mind and body relax. And sorry, I am rushing through these, but hopefully it's not too fast. So paced breathing, this is a huge one. This is one of the few things that we can really control in our like internal body. And so breathing slowly, breathing deeply helps our body to relax. And so just taking sort of slow in breaths, and especially like slowing the out breath tends to be quite helpful. So doing that before bed or doing that in bed, maybe counting, that can give you something to do, and it can help relax the body. Meditation, there's so many out there, and there's some apps in a future slide that I'll show you as well. But that can be helpful as well, give you something to focus on. Progressive muscle relaxation. If you Google this, there's many like YouTube videos. But this is essentially when you tense and release different body parts. And this helps, particularly if you're feeling physically restless or physically tense. So a lot of these apps also have like a progressive muscle relaxation. So these are some examples. I like Smiley Mind because I believe it's not for profit and it's free completely. Some of the others you get a little bit free and then you got to pay. But these are all sort of some apps that people report liking sometimes. These are more like stories. If you like, listen to just stories that aren't too enticing, like they don't keep you up. Yes, I see someone saying Smiling Mind is fantastic. Great. And if you're going to do this as well, a lot of people try meditation and they feel like it's not for them, or they can't clear their mind. I'd say it's not for like anyone. Like almost everyone struggles with meditation, but I think also our pressures on ourselves is a bit too high. We can't expect to have a clear mind. Again, that's what the mind is for. The mind thinks about things. So I think definitely giving it a go and not seeing like, if you get distracted, not seeing that as a failure. You just you've noticed it and then you try and refocus back on the meditation. And over time, we know that often does help. But yeah, it's very hard to go from 1 million stimuli a day to just sitting with your eyes closed, counting your breath. So I think if you can't do it initially, don't get disheartened about it. I think it does take a lot of repetition. It is hard to do. If you need more help after today, there's a few options that we've added in. So one is self-help. And so there's a thing called Bedtime Window, which is a 5-week digital insomnia program, Australian. This Way Up is an online insomnia program that they also offer. Sleep Ninja is a sleep app for teenagers. So these are sort of self-help things that you can do. For some people, it works. For a lot of people, it might not, and that's where maybe like you might want to look into more support. But this can be helpful. GPs, so definitely, if this is just about insomnia, if you think that you might have sleep apnea, where you're not maybe breathing as well and you're snoring, if you have restless leg syndrome, where your legs feel very uncomfortable, if you have they call it like a sleep phase issue, where you only get sleepy at like 3 a.m. Or you get really sleepy at like 6 p.m. These are things that the GP can assess, and they can refer you to a sleep study or a sleep psychologist, or considering sleeping medication, which should really only be prescribed or taken sort of short term. And so ideally you're doing the other things that we talked about, because sleeping medication is very effective in the short term, but there's risks of dependence, and in the long term it starts to actually impact on sleep. Then sleep psychologists. So of course, like today is a webinar, so there's only so much that we can cover and tailor. And but if you feel like you want help with your sleep, reaching out to a psychologist, ideally someone that can do CBTI. So if you search up Sleep Central, if you're interested in CBTI, this is the Australasian Sleep Association's directory of psychologists that have training in CBTI. So if you're interested in that, you can look that up. And again, the sleep interventions can be quite short, and so often within a few sessions, improvements are seen usually. So a lot of people go years or decades having insomnia, not realizing that actually there are ways that we can try and help. It's not for everybody, obviously, but if you're really struggling, I'd recommend reaching out to a sleep psychologist and doing CBTI. That is the end. So we're going to end with one thing that you want to try this week, and then we'll do some Q&A. So I don't know if we'll just give it a minute and thank you for the comments. If you want to pick one thing, so there's many, sometimes we can get motivated to try many things, but the hamburger. But if we can choose one thing and make that consistent, that is probably the best option. Waking at the same time, routine, sleep app, phone out of the bedroom. I love that one. I think I've tried that many times, and sometimes, you go back to the phone in the bedroom, but I think having the phone out of the bedroom somewhere else, like in the kitchen, is really lovely in terms of waking up. You feel different for some reason. Routine and consistency being a key one. Sleep hygiene, paradoxical intent. Great to see that one is coming up. Phone out of the bedroom. If I wake getting up, great. Yeah, thank you all. I won't be able to read them all because they're moving around. But thank you. Should we do some Q&A?
Yeah, I think we should. There's been quite a few questions come through in the chat, Enrique. It was and thank you. It was a really informative session. There was a couple of questions early on when you were talking about that sleep pattern, and there was two that sort of jumped out at me. And probably the first one was just about, you sort of noted that it's sort of natural for us to have those sort of wake ups and interruptions as we move through the cycle and then go back to sleep again. Is there normal, quote unquote, for people in terms of how many times you sort of notice you wake up or not, or is there a number that kind of you can recognize that you may be experiencing insomnia or something similar to that?
I wouldn't say there's a number, but the sleep cycles are about 90 minutes. And so it might be that if it's because of that, because you're just in the shallow end, it might happen every 90 or 100 minutes or so. A lot of it happens without us remembering it. We sort of wake up and then go back to bed. The key thing is, like, are you going back to sleep fast, or then is it waking you up and then staying up? And if it's the second one, then that's where maybe extra support around it would be recommended. But I wouldn't worry otherwise if it's just a little bit, like a minute here and there.
Okay, great. And then following on from that, and I ask this mainly because I suffer from this myself. What if you don't dream? Is dreaming important? Now, I've certainly seen in the past that everybody dreams, you just don't remember it. But what's your opinion on that question? Is it important to dream? And what if you feel like you don't dream?
That's a great question. The dreaming is actually not something I know as much about. I think, or not even just me, I think the whole field, dreaming is a little bit of a confusing, mysterious thing. And it's true that you might be dreaming and not remembering it. And so we tend to forget all of our dreams. An interesting thing is that sometimes we think we've forgotten, and then someone says something that day, or you see something that, oh God, I had a dream about that. So sometimes we think we've forgotten it, but it's still in the brain somehow, and then something else triggers that memory. Some people seem to remember the dreams a lot more. People that write down their dreams seem to report then they start remembering them more often. So the dreaming itself, yeah, I'm not too sure that I can say too much about whether it's maybe the risks of not remembering the dream. As long as you're getting like a normal night's sleep. And if you ever have concerns, you can do sleep tests where they can measure like your REM and how much you're having of that. If there's any REM issues, they can assess through the tests. They're not like just watches, but they put things on you and they measure all these different physiological factors.
Great. So next question that I noticed, and I think this is probably relevant for a lot of people, is if you have stayed up at night despite trying some strategies, you've kind of got through, and it's midnight, it's 1, it's 2, and then you finally get to sleep. Should you wake at the same time as you would normally, just for that consistency pattern, or are you better off just letting the sleep roll through?
Ideally, yes. The key factor that would change that is like safety. So safety comes first. If you're going on a road trip, or you might have to nap, like you might have to have coffee. So that comes first. But if it's occasional ones and there aren't sort of risks associated with it, ideally you still wake up. And what will happen is that the sleep pressure won't have come down as much because you only slept for maybe 3 hours. So you're going to wake up with a sleep pressure already a lot higher, and you're much more likely to sleep a lot more the next night. As long as if you go to bed at the right time, you're more likely to not have that insomnia as badly the next night. And so sometimes even that can help that frame of mind of, if I'm not sleeping well tonight, I'm actually more likely to sleep better the next night.
Okay. Yeah. And then a couple of questions about reading. I think for me personally, reading is a really important part of my sleep routine. But what about reading lights to help you read, obviously at night? You can't see, most people can't see in the dark. And then there was another question about yellow lights cutting out blue light to help you sleep. Do you have any questions there? Any thoughts on those?
Yes. So blue light is sort of worse than the more reddish light, and so that's one thing that if you're going to have a reading lamp, ideally having a more like warm light, it just impacts. It has less of an effect on that system. So did you ask about glasses as well? Or am I imagining that? Or I might have read someone.
No, it was just more. It was definitely about just having a reading light. Does having a yellow light cut that blue light out, which is more important.
Yeah.
Noticing, I think, just because of the piece you were talking about with reducing light as you're getting prepared for sleep, and then the reading piece, that contradiction, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, so it's all maybe like a bit of a spectrum. So no light would be the one that has the most effect, but if you're going to have some light, having less light rather than having the full room lights, having like a lamp or having a reading light, having it warm is better than having it like a white light. So it's all like incremental things that nothing in by themselves is going to sort of solve the sleep issue or cause the insomnia, but it's all, I guess, cumulative. So the more that you can do. And for all the strategies today, if you only have sleep issues sometimes, you might not actually have to do all these things. Whereas if you have poor sleep, you might have to do them a lot more. If you have really bad sleep, you might have to do them really, be a lot more rigorous about some of these rules. And so it kind of depends on each person's situation as well.
Okay, brilliant. Look, we had plenty more questions there, Henrique, as I'm sure you can see, but we are at the hour, so we'll finish up there.
Thank you.
So on behalf of everyone in the audience, once again, big thank you, Henrique, for being so generous with your time, your experiences and your knowledge around this topic this afternoon. And thank you in the audience on behalf of Henrique and the Institute for joining us today. I hope you really did find the session valuable and found some strategies that will help you if you are struggling with sleep or just want to have better sleep. And I hope you all sleep well tonight with your new learnt strategies. Before you go, do please take a moment to complete the short survey that will appear when you close the Zoom link. Your feedback is incredibly important to us, and it really helps us shape the future of the Lead the Way sessions that we hold, and the broader IML offerings. So if you'd like to explore further development, as I mentioned earlier, opportunities for yourself or for your team, do let us know in the survey, and our team will be happy to get in touch, particularly to talk about our corporate membership offering and the Certified Practicing Manager accreditation. And the last point for those of you still with us, finally, our next Lead the Way webinar is coming up on Wednesday, September 7. Join speaker Ellen Joan Ford for an insightful session exploring what authentic leadership looks like in an increasingly AI-driven workplace, and deep dive into the challenges and opportunities that AI presents leaders. More information will be in the post-session email that we will be sending to you today. Thank you again, Henrique, and to all of you for joining us today. I hope everyone has a fantastic afternoon. We look forward to seeing you at the next Lead the Way session.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.